This place was so much bigger than it had seemed from high up on the hill that morning. Despite all my searching, I had found no water, nothing to eat. I couldn't go no further, and neither could Stella. She lay there stretched out beside me on the sand, panting her heart out. We would have to stay where we were for the night. I thought of going into the forest a little to sleep on the ground under the trees. I could make a nest of soft dead leaves on the jungle floor was thick with them, but I dared not venture in, not with the shadow of night falling fast over the island. The howling had started up again far away in the forest, the last mellifluous evensong, a chanting that went on until darkness covered the island. Insects, well, that is what I presume they were anyway, whirled and whined from the forest. There was a hollow tapping like a frantic woodpecker. There was scraping, scratching, and a grunting, grating noise that sounded like frogs. The whole orchestra of the jungle was tuning up, but it wasn't the sounds that frightened me. It was those phantom eyes. I wanted to be as far as possible from those eyes. I found a small cave at one end of the beach with a dry, sandy floor. I lay down and tried to sleep, but Stella would not let me be. She whined at me in the pain of her hunger and thirst, so that I slept only fitfully. The jungle droned and cracked and croaked, and all night long the mosquitoes were at me too. They whined in my ears. They drove me mad. I held my hands over my ears to shut out the sound of them. I curled myself round Stella, tried to forget where I was, to lose myself in my dreams. I remembered then that it was my birthday, and thought of my last birthday back at home with Eddie and Matt and the barbecue we'd had in the garden. How the sausages had smelled so good. I slept at last. The next morning I woke up cold and hungry and shivering and bitten all over. It took me some moments to remember where I was and all that had happened to me. I was suddenly overwhelmed by one cruel reality after another. My utter aloneness, my separation from my mother and father, and the dangers all around me. I cried aloud in my misery until I saw that Stella was gone. I ran out of the cave. She was nowhere to be seen. I called out for her. I listened for her, but only the gibbons howled in reply, and then I turned and I saw her. She was up on the rocks high above my cave, half hidden from me, but even so I could see that her head was down. She was clearly intent on something. I clambered up to find out what it was. I heard her drinking before I got there, lapping rhythmically, noisily, as she always did. She did not even look up as I approached. That was when I saw she was drinking from a bowl, a battered tin bowl, and then I noticed something strange up on a flat shelf of rock above her. I left Stella to her water feast and climbed up further to investigate. Another bowl of water, and beside it palm leaves laid out on the rock and half covered with an upturned tin. I sat down and drank the water without pause for breath. Water had never tasted so wonderful to me as it did then. Still gasping, I lifted aside the tin. Fish. Thin strips of translucent white fish, dozens of them, laid out neatly in rows on palm leaves, and 5, 6, 7 small red bananas. Red bananas! I ate the fish first, savouring each precious strip, but even as I ate I was looking around me, looking for the telltale trembling of leaves at the edge of the forest, or for the trail of footprints in the sand. I could see none. Yet someone had brought this to me. Someone must be there. Someone must be watching me. I wasn't sure whether to be fearful at this revelation or overjoyed. Stella interrupted my thoughts. She was whimpering pitifully at me from the rock below, and I knew it wasn't love or comfort she was after. She caught every strip of fish I threw her, snaffled it up in one gulp, and waited for the next, head on one side, one ear pricked, and after that it was one for me and one for her. Her beseeching eyes would not let me do otherwise. The fish was raw, but I did not mind. I was too hungry to mind, and so was Stella. I kept the red bananas all to myself. I ate every single one of them. They weren't at all like bananas back home, but much sweeter altogether, much juicier and much more delicious. I could have eaten a dozen more. Once I'd finished, I stood up and scanned the forest. My benefactor, whoever he or she was, had to be somewhere close by. I was sure I had nothing to fear. I had to make some kind of contact. I put my hands to my mouth and called out again and again, "Thank you! Thank you! Thank you!" My words echoed around the island. Suddenly the forest was alive again with noise, a great cacophony of singing and hooting and howling and cawing and croaking. Stella barked wildly back at it, and as for me, I felt suddenly exhilarated, elated, ecstatically happy. I jumped up and down, laughing and laughing until my laughter turned to tears of joy. I was not alone on this island. Whoever was here must be friendly. Why else would they have fed us? But why wouldn't they show themselves? They would have to come back for the bowls, I thought. I would leave a message. I found a sharp stone, knelt down and scraped out my message on the rock beside the bowls. "Thank you. My name is Michael. I fell off a boat. Who are you?" After that, I determined to remain on the beach all that day and stay close to my cave and rock above where the fish had been left for us. I would keep it always in sight, so I would at least be able to see who it was that had helped me. Stella ran on ahead of me down into the sea, barking at me, inviting me to join her. I didn't need any persuading. I plunged and cavorted and whooped and splashed. But through all my antics, she just cruised steadily on. She always looked so serious when she swam, chin up, paddling purposefully. The sea was balmy and calm, barely a ripple of a wave to be seen. I didn't dare go out of my depth. I'd had quite enough of that for a lifetime. I came out clean and refreshed and invigorated, a new person. The sea was a great healer. My bites were still there, but they did not burn any more. I decided I would explore further along the beach, right up to the end if I could, just so long as I could keep my cave in view all the time. There were shells here, millions of them, golden, pink, thrown up in long lines all along the beach. Before long, I came across what seemed, at some distance away, like a flat wedge of rock protruding only very slightly from the sand. Stella was scrabbling excitedly at the edge of it. Turned out to be not a rock at all, but a long sheet of rusted metal, clearly all that was left of the side of the ship's hull, now sunk deep in the sand. I wondered what ship it was, how long ago she had been wrecked. Had some terrible storm driven her onto the island? Had there been any survivors? Could any of them still be here? I knelt down in the sand and ran my hand along it. I noticed then a fragment of clear glass lying in the sand nearby, from a bottle perhaps. It was hot to touch, too hot to handle. It came to me in a flash. Eddie had showed me how to do it. We'd tried it in the playground at school, hiding behind the dustbins where no one could see us. A piece of paper, a bit of glass and the sun. We had made fire. I didn't have any paper, but leaves would do. I ran up the beach and gathered whatever I could find from under the trees. Bits of cane, twigs, all sorts of leaves. Paper thin, tinder dry. I made a small pile on the sand and sat down beside it. I held my piece of glass close to the leaves and angled it to the sun. I had to keep it still, quite still, and wait for the first wisp of smoke. If only I could get the fire lit, if only I could keep it alight, and then I could sleep by it at night. It would keep the flies away, and the animals too, and sooner or later a ship had to come by. Someone would spot the smoke. I sat, and I sat. Stella came over to bother me. She wanted to play, but I pushed her away. In the end, she went off and sulked, stretching out with a sigh under the shade of the palm trees. The sun was roasting hot, but still nothing happened. My arm was beginning to ache, so I arranged a frame of twigs above the leaves, laid the glass across it, and then crouched by it and waited. Still nothing. All of a sudden, Stella sprang up from her sleep, a deep growl in her throat. She turned and ran down towards me, wheeling round to bark her fury at the forest. And then I saw what it was that had disturbed her. A shadow under the trees moved and came lumbering out of the sunlight towards us. A monkey, a giant monkey, not a gibbon at all. It moved slowly on all fours and was a brown, ginger brown, an orangutan. I was sure of it. He sat down and just a few feet from me and considered me. I dared not move. When he'd seen enough, he scratched his neck casually, turned and made his way on all fours back into the forest slowly. Stella went on growling long after he had gone. So there were orangutans here as well as gibbons. Or perhaps it was the orangutans who had made the howling noise and not the gibbons at all. Maybe I'd been wrong all along. I'd seen a Clint Eastwood film once with an orangutan. That one I remembered had been friendly enough, and I just hoped this one would be the same. Then I saw smoke. I smelled smoke. There was a glow in amongst my pile of leaves. I crouched down at once and blew on it gently. The glow became flames. I put on a few more leaves and then dry twig or two and then bigger ones. I had a fire. I had a fire. I dashed into the forest and collected all the debris, all the dried up coconut shells, the wood I could find. Back and forth I went until my fire was roaring and crackling like an inferno. Sparks were flying high into the air. Smoke was rising into the trees behind me. I knew I could not rest now, that the fire would need still more wood, bigger wood, branches even. I would have to fetch and carry until I was quite certain I had enough to keep it going and enough in reserve. Stella, I noticed, would not come with me into the forest, but stayed waiting for me by the fire. I knew well enough why. I kept a wary eye out for the orangutan herself, but I was too intent on my fire now to worry much about him. My pile of wood was huge now, but all the same, I went back into the forest one last time, just in case the fire burned itself out quicker than I expected. I had to go deeper into the forest, so it took a while. I was coming out of the trees, loaded with wood up to my chin, when I realised there was much less smoke coming from the fire than there had been before, and no flames at all. Then, through the smoke, I saw him, the orangutan. He was crouching down and scooping sand onto my fire. He stood up and came towards me, now out of the smoke. He was not an orangutan at all. He was a man.